All rise. Here's Judge Napolitano.
Oh, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Well, because it was Saturday night, they didn't really have time to respond to the Saturday blockbuster from the New York Times.
Right.
Said back in on his 1995 return, Donald Trump declared $916 million worth of business losses,
right,
which he could then carry forward and offset any income, which allowed the New York Times and others to speculate, well, maybe he didn't pay taxes for 15 years. You've looked at all the stuff on display.
Right.
Did Donald Trump do anything wrong?
No. No. In the United States of America, we tell the government what we owe it. The government doesn't tell us. And Congress has given guidelines, very lengthy, very complex guidelines. The tax code, I'm holding my hand about 4 feet off the floor. The tax code is that many pages. That's how complex it is. And if a person goes through the tax code and finds ways to minimize their obligation, they are following the laws that Congress has made available. It's a famous Supreme Court opinion. Oliver Wendell Holmes, who probably wouldn't agree with Donald Trump on anything, said nobody should pay a nickel more than they actually owe. Now, having said that, the issue is, where did the Times get this? Yeah. And is there a problem with them publishing it? I almost said punishing it, publishing it. We don't know how they got it. They claim they got it in the mail. The returning address was Trump Tower.
I watched the reporters on
This
Week with George Stephanopoulos. They said that it was just in his mailbox. This woman went in, it was in the mailbox. Then they went to see the accountant who's semi-retired in Florida at 80 years old. He goes, yeah, that's me. I did that.
Okay, so journalistic ethics, they should have presented it to Donald Trump or representatives of his, not somebody that worked for him 30 years ago, and said, is this yours and do you want to comply with it? He's going to be on the show later today, and you can ask him if they did that. I doubt that they did that, but they should have done it. Why? Because they had in their hands a document that is protected by the highest degree of protection we have for civilian documents, not government documents. And once you file it, it achieves the protection of a government document.
Right. His attorney said that they obtained this illegally and that he did not authorize this to be released.
Okay, they probably, the person who put it in their hands probably broke the law. Let's call that person the thief. The thief, whoever that person is, can be criminally liable and civilly liable. But the Times is immune from civil liability. Why? Because Donald Trump has portrayed himself in this campaign as a brilliant businessman whose background is appropriate for the presidency. And part of that brilliance, in his view, is how he dealt with his taxes. So his taxes are what the law calls of material interest to the public. Sure. When the publisher, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, gets its hands on something that's of material interest to the public, we can reveal it with impunity.
Gotcha. Hillary did the same thing. She took a loss, a $700,000 loss in 2015. The New York Times did as well.
That's how it works.
Look, some of the Times conclusions, in my view, are wacky and don't make sense. Right. Just because he had this loss in 1995 doesn't mean he's not paying taxes in 2016. He can explain that to you when you talk to him.
They forward the loss, but we don't know because we don't have his taxes.
Judge, today is the first Monday in October. That means the U.S. Supreme Court convenes with one empty seat.
Yes. Do you know what case they're hearing today, Mr. Kilmeade?
What?
It will affect whether or not the Washington Redskins can keep their name. Can the government prohibit the use of a name that is offensive to some people? That's how they're starting off. I don't know which way it's going to go, but I do know that the Chief Justice has put off the more controversial cases until after the first of the year, because the new president will presumably have her or his nominee on the court.
But isn't that controversial?
It's very controversial, and that's the one that they are dealing with now. Okay. It doesn't involve the Redskins. It involves a rock group, but the principle is the same.
Interesting stuff. All right, Judge, thank you very much for joining us live.
Just hope they leave the Giants out of this.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a big game tonight.
Go Giants tonight.
Well, Hillary Clinton already has a problem appealing to the younger voters, the millennials, and this not going to help.
They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. The idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing. It's a false promise. But I don't think you tell idealistic people, particularly young people, that they bought into a false promise.
False promise. Well, that leaked audio of Clinton mocking Sanders supporters back in February from a fundraiser back in Virginia. The Clinton camp claims she was just being sympathetic to the plight of young people, but what did she really mean?
For more on this, we turn to political editor for Town Hall and Fox News contributor Guy Benson. Hey, Guy, thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning.
What did she mean by that?
Well, I think if you look at the context of what Mrs. Clinton said, she wasn't necessarily belittling millennials who supported Bernie Sanders. What she was basically saying was there are a lot of young people graduating from college unable to find good-paying jobs and feel forced to delay their plans for their lives, live in their parents' basements. And so I don't think this is deplorables 2.0, but it is pretty clearly, in my view, an indictment of the Obama economy. Look who's been in charge for the last 8 years, and she has basically the entire platform that Barack Obama had and wants to continue it for 4 more years. More of the same, which is what Donald Trump has been saying over and over again about her.
And you know, Guy, when she and Bernie, they were supposed to be together today at a campaign event, but mysteriously after this came out, they've decided to put it off for a couple of days. You know, she's going to link arms with him and say we're together on the same page. But in that whole thing where, you know, she talks about these baristas living down in their parents' basement, she distances herself from free college, which she's been promoting, and free health care, and says, I'm more, you know, I'm kind of from center left to center right. So as she tries to get these millennials to vote for her, you realize, wait a minute, she doesn't stand for the stuff we stand for.
And I think part of it also, Steve, is if you're a Bernie supporter who's a young person, you might look at the audio and clips of it and some of the commentary about it and say, oh, gosh, you know, is she making fun of me? Is she saying that I bought into a lie that I'm too stupid to understand? Or do you just sort of shrug and say, whatever, she's kind of lame anyway. Of course, she's talking out of both sides of her mouth to different audiences. She can wrap her arms around Bernie Sanders at every event from now until November 8th. I just don't care.
Yeah.
Are you going to show up and vote in November?
Guys,
I think that's a challenge for her.
You say it's not deplorable comment 2.0, but there are a lot of millennials that are not happy with this. In fact, there's a tweet from a Sanders supporter, Millennials for Revolution, that says, we aren't in our parents' basements. We are an entire generation of workers who are sick of being shafted by neoliberalism. Hashtag basement dwellers. So that's a comment from someone who is pretty offended by it. Thank you so much for being with us, Guy. That's right.
Sure thing.
All right, ahead of the first and only vice presidential debate of the 2016 race, more than 40% of Americans cannot name the vice presidential nominee on either party, Ainsley.
That's right. 41% could not correctly name the GOP's vice presidential nominee, Mike Pence, and 46% were unsure of the name of the Democratic presidential nominee, Tim Kaine.
All right, so Steve is hitting the streets right now in New York City because we couldn't get him into another city so quickly to tell and find out what people actually know.
All right. I tell you what, I'm at 48th and 6th Avenue. Here's somebody just coming off the subway. Hi, good morning. How are you? Good.
Good morning, yeah.
Do you know who's running for President of the United States?
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton
yes,
and Donald Trump.
yes, right.
Okay. Do you have any idea who these two people are?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
What about this man? Any idea who that man is?
No.
Okay. He's the head of the World Bank. All right.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
It really hurts my feelings now.
That's okay. Let's come on over here. What's your name?
Vicky Seaver.
And?
Dan.
All right, Dan. This man would like to be vice president. What's his name?
Kane. Kane.
Right. What's his first name?
The wrestler.
Very good. Where's he from?
Ooh.
Let's
Rhode
see,
Island.
is he from Ohio?
No. He's from Virginia.
Virginia.
Okay.
What about this guy?
Oh, that's Pence.
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence. And where's he from?
He's from somewhere really good.
One of the Dakotas. I don't know.
One of the Dakotas. He's from Indiana.
Indiana.
Okay. Who's your governor? It's this guy.
Yeah.
And who's this man right there?
Oh, that's Brian.
I'm not running for anything.
Pretty low.
And what party would he be running, platform-wise?
Oh,
I'm
my
running on the
goodness.
cake party.
The
He's a
head of the
Republican,
whole.
right?
Well,
I think
yeah.
Tupperware party. Closer.
We love our Tupperware.
I'm always fresh.
Who doesn't love Tupperware?
Just don't burp me.
Let's come on over here real quickly. There are people who are dialing something on their phone. What's your name?
Katrina.
Katrina. Oh, never mind about that guy. This guy would be like to be vice president of the United States. What's his name?
Someone Mike Pence?
No,
Oh.
it's Hillary's running mate. I can't think of his name right now.
Okay, well, you're part of the 40% of Americans who don't know Tim Kaine.
Yes.
What about that guy?
That's Mike Pence
Yeah, okay, very good. And tell me one thing about Mike Pence.
from Indiana.
Okay, that's one thing.
From Indiana. I don't know.
Are you from Indiana?
No,
No.
we're from North Dakota.
Okay. Well, I heard a minute ago he was from one of the Dakotas. Are you going to be voting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Have
Ask her
you
if
made
they've
up your
ever-
mind yet?
Steve?
Probably Trump.
Probably Trump.
All right.
Steve, could you ask them if they've ever fracked?
You're from the Dakotas?
Yep.
Yes.
Are you involved in fracking?
No. Other side of the state, unfortunately.
Sorry, Brian, wrong side of the state.
Ask him, show him Brian's picture, Steve.
Okay. Yes. And then finally, this man right here. Are you familiar with him?
Very familiar.
Oh, really?
Yep.
How familiar are you? Are you familiar? Are you as
No,
familiar
not
as
as,
she is?
no, apparently not.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
going on? Brian, what's going on between you and this woman right here and not this man?
I'm not saying a word.
She's
All
a
right,
fan.
fine.
I'm not saying a word.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But she's
Vote
a
early,
lovely
vote
woman, and
often.
they seem like a lovely couple.
They do indeed. All right.
36 days into the election, and the presidential candidates headed back on the campaign trail today. That after a weekend of stories left both of the nominees doing some damage control. But is this just a sneak peek at what to be the final weeks before the election? A series of October surprises? Here to debate, the Woodhouse brothers. Brad, president of Correct the Record in Dallas, is playing the role of Dallas, executive director of the North Carolina Republican Party. First off, Dallas, you can't be happy the way your candidate handled last week, were you?
Well, I think Mr. Trump needs to get back on the message that he can build this economy and get people back to work. And I think, Brian, the important thing the candidates have to remember is what is the most valuable thing they have right now? What is the thing that they cannot get back? They can raise more money,
right,
but they cannot generate more time. And any time talking about yourself in this situation is wasted. You need the commentators, and you need to be talking about your opponent.
Right.
And that's true for both sides.
Brad, after this story in the New York Times comes out about Hillary going after all Bill's women, and the fact is the Sanders tape leaks out, does that mean Hillary will not be going to the back of the plane today?
I think she'll go to the back of the plane. Look, I think the New York Times story you referenced, there was really nothing. There was nothing new in there. We've heard these accusations before. We've heard some of this history before. And actually, Politico changed its headline about the tape, about the Sanders supporters, because it's been mischaracterized by everyone. I mean, she was reflecting empathy for those people and saying that, you know, and just saying that
she was reflecting empathy
they clearly
by saying they were down in their parents' basement?
Yeah.
Well,
Come
no.
on,
What she was saying was,
That's an
what
insult,
she was
Brad.
saying was, Dallas. What she was saying was, if you're in those
What she was saying was
circumstances,
that they
of
couldn't get
course,
jobs under the Obama
Dallas.
economy?
What
They
she
can't
was
get
saying
hired
was,
under the Obama economy?
hey, Dallas. What she was saying was, if you're in those circumstances,
right,
of course you're going to be attracted to someone who is promising a political revolution.
But Dallas, what she has done is adopt Bernie Sanders' principles. You can only conclude that it's insincerely adopting his principles because she says it's not possible to give everyone everything free like college education.
Well, I don't know. She's kind of running on that. And, of course, but the Clintons have a really distant connection to the truth about any time. And I think that she seems so insincere. And voters have to listen to these scandals, and they have to relate to what they think the next 4 years is going to look like. It's going to be an ugly reality TV show if the White House staff has to guard against what the Clintons used to refer to as bimbo eruptions.
Are you
Bill
kidding,
Clinton in the
Dallas?
White House. It's just
Are
a
you
mess.
going to suggest? Are you really going to suggest? You say
Yeah.
reality TV show. Donald Trump was the star of a reality TV show. You really think that the Americans want that? That they want fat shaming? That they want calling a Miss Universe Miss Piggy? That they want that type of person in the White House? If you want
25
to
years ago.
foreshaddle,
Look, here's the thing.
if you
is
want to
the candidates
foreshadow.
here can,
But
look,
Dallas,
if you want to vote,
just,
if you want to vote against Mr. Trump because he said some crass things, that's up to you. But the Clintons have lived a very crass
right.
lifestyle
But
for
Dallas,
the last
do you think
30
that Donald
years.
Trump 2 weeks ago was in better shape than he is now, and is he still going for the shiny object instead of staying on the goal, which was to win the White House? Do you think that there's been a problem the last week, and do you think there might be a problem in their camp with leadership?
I have full confidence in the leadership of that campaign. We work closely with them in North Carolina. The candidates
Right.
both Mr. Pence and Trump are here often, but I will say this. He needs to aggressively get back on the message that Hillary Clinton has been around Washington for 30 years. She is the status quo.
Right.
She will not make things better. And any minute that he's not talking about that is a wasted minute. And again, I go back to this. The most precious resource the campaign has now is time.
Right.
Because it is running out.
It is. 36 days to go, and right now Hillary's looking like she's slightly ahead in many of the key states, although she trails lately in North Carolina. Without
Florida,
we're
going to beat her here.
There is no,
you
win
won't.
for the candidate.
I'll bet you Thanksgiving dinner on it.
All right,
I'll bet
Thanksgiving
you dinner
dinner
on
I
it.
don't want
North
to eat
Carolina.
with you this year.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm going to the beach.
All right. See you later, guys. I don't think it will be a profitable Thanksgiving for you. If your mom brings you together, I'd like to know about it.
I want to bring in Betsy McCoy right now. She is former New York lieutenant governor and a Trump economic advisor, and Ohio State Senator Capri Cafaro. Good to see you, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
And Betsy, let me kick it off with you. You're a Trump supporter. You heard the news. Do you think this strategy of saying he was a genius effectively deflects how this may resonate with voters who may be upset?
The fact is it's important to say that because since 1918 it has been perfectly legal and in fact encouraged for risk takers, entrepreneurs, whether they're builders or investors of other types or somebody opening a corner drugstore, to take risks. And one way that they're encouraged to take risks is the tax code says, look, if you have a big loss, you can apply that loss against future earnings, right? It makes it less painful to incur that loss, and so people build more, create more jobs as a result. The New York Times article presented this in a sleazy way. The article was full of innuendo that somehow Donald Trump had done something morally defective, if not illegal, when in fact he's doing exactly what Congress encourages Americans everywhere to do. Take risks, build buildings, create jobs.
That's absolutely right. Capri, I mean, look, there's no secret here. I mean, the mainstream media is calling this a bombshell. I'm trying to figure out where the bombshell is, because there's no secret that the tax code allows you to offset losses to your income for 15 years. So he could be, or 18 years, he could be offsetting 3 years prior to 1995 and 15 years after.
Afterwards, exactly. Well, you know, I mean, I think there are two things at play here. One is the political narrative. You know, anytime someone, you know, withholds information or is reluctant to release it on their own, you know, it allows the media, in this case, as well as, you know, your opponent, to write the narrative for you. And this is what's happening, unfortunately, for Donald Trump. People are filling in the blanks, trying to make this out to be something much bigger, trying to say that, you know, he's shirking his responsibility, you know, there's something bigger here that he's hiding. And so, you know, that's the risk that you have in politics. Now, the reality is exactly what you guys have just said. I mean, net operating loss carryovers exist both at the state and the federal level. You also have the issue of depreciation for, you know, real property, which he also can take advantage of. And so, you know, there are two things at play here. The reality of the tax code and the political optics. Unfortunately, the political optics aren't fantastic for him, but the reality is we haven't had federal tax reform in any meaningful way since 1986.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's done anything illegal here.
Which pushes the question, why, Dagan? Why no tax reform?
Because, again, it benefits both parties. The very practice that Donald Trump used in this report from the New York Times has been backed on both sides of the aisle, and they make no move to get rid of it. But that goes to the point of, I want to raise the issue of, like, do people care about this issue? Because the Wall Street Journal actually polled voters on this in September, and just 6% said their top concern was Donald Trump's refusal to release his income tax return.
So I think their top concern is what their own income tax return is going to look like, how much money they're going to earn in the future. That's what Americans want the media and the candidates to talk about.
The reason I don't think that this resonates, in part, you see it in the polls, but also anybody who has self-employment income knows that you can take losses and carry them forward in other years. Half of the country pays no net federal income tax, so somebody knows how to use the tax code to their advantage, not just Donald Trump.
Yeah, I love the mainstream media calling it bombshell. What's bombshell? That he followed the law? I'm trying to figure out where the bombshell is.
Well, my question is, though, let's say we reform the taxes, you're not going to have loss carry forwards going forward?
any longer?
That would be bad.
That would be a terrible thing for the United States. Okay, so we have a war on capital going on. We have tax shaming, which Betsy called it in the green room as we were getting ready here. And it's a system that I think is going to drive people crazy if we don't fix it. But Mr. Trump didn't do anything wrong. If anything, all he's trying to do, he's a risk taker in the free enterprise system. What risks has Secretary Clinton taken to make the $250 million that she's earned?
Good point. The
What
fact
risks?
is most
This is
politicians
simply about
get a
political
paycheck
optics.
from the
That's all it is.
taxpayer. They are bloodsuckers and parasites.
A big push today by both candidates to win over voters in swing states. Donald Trump is headed to Colorado, where new polls show him neck and neck with Hillary Clinton. The Democratic nominee, meanwhile, is talking about the economy in Ohio. Her trip to Akron comes as a new Washington Post ABC News poll shows her trouncing Trump in the first debate. Joining us right now is former Arkansas governor and Republican presidential candidate himself, Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Maria. Great to be with you today.
We got the vice presidential debate Tuesday night and then the next presidential debate next Sunday. What do you think Donald Trump will do differently next Sunday as it relates to the first debate?
I think he'll go on the attack a whole lot more with Hillary Clinton starting at the beginning, and he's going to be on the defensive about these tax returns. But he doesn't need to be. He needs to push back as hard as he can. I was saying as early as March, don't release those tax returns. There's nothing good that's going to come out of it. And here's what a lot of Americans don't know, because the press won't tell you this. There is nothing in the law that says you have to release tax returns. What you do have to release is a statement of financial interest, which is a lot more extensive than a tax return. It's a lot more explanatory about a person's financial situation than a tax return. And nobody understands a tax return. And let me just make this point, Maria. I doubt there's any of you on the panel today who do your own taxes, and none of you pay more than you have to pay. That's true for most Americans.
Right.
You know, I heard Rudy, say that Trump was a genius, and Christie said that. Look, Trump's not a genius. His accountants are, because those the army of accountants, that's who put his tax returns together. So he needs to go into that debate pushing back hard on this and getting this issue behind him.
That's one of the issues I want to bring up with you, Governor. It's Dagan McDowell, is that to use the word genius when you're a surrogate responding to this report in the New York Times, the problem might be what is hitting the Trump campaign, some of it his own making, but also the response. The response is not the greatest, if you will. And that's one thing that the campaign can fix, right?
I agree, Dagan. And look, I think by trying to say that he's a genius and this was a great strategy, no, he simply did what Warren Buffett does. He does what George Soros does. He does what Bill Gates or any rich person does. They hire accountants. They pay all the taxes they have to pay, but they use all the complexity of the tax code for their advantage. And nobody except a total idiot is going to say, gosh, I just feel bad. I'm not paying enough. Just write a great big old check and send it into the government, because I know how brilliantly they're going to take care of that money and how wonderfully they're going to spend it.
Harlan Hill, I just want to point out, the New York Times did not pay any tax in 2014.
Well, and apparently...
So there you go. New York Times, no taxes for the year.
Right, and Hillary Clinton's taken losses in the past as well. So, look, my concern with this is that he's spending too much time explaining. And if he's explaining, he's losing. And so I don't really even want him to respond to this tax thing anymore. We've laid it out. Let the surrogates handle it from here on out. Totally. Let's move on. Yeah.
Governor, you're a great campaigner and you're a great politician. There seems to be a disproportionate personal attack on Mr. Trump, less so on his policies, more on him, the sexism charges, the racism, all this sort of stuff. As a campaigner, what would you recommend? As a strategist, what would you say to him? What message would you give him?
Anthony, what I would do is to just urge him, when he's hit on these personal things, is to just brush it back by saying, when they can't attack what I want to do for America, when they can't find fault with how I'm going to change these trade deals, reform the tax code, when they can't deal with the fact that I'm going to actually defeat ISIS, the only thing they have left is to come after me with these ridiculous personal attacks. And so when Hillary Clinton is attacking me personally, it's because she's got nothing loaded in her gun that would do a thing to change this country and make us great again. That's exactly what I tell it, and then forget about it. Don't defend it. Don't explain it. Harlan was right. When you're explaining in politics, you're losing ground.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, the first debate, he was on defense from the get-go. And whether it's explaining the birther issue, explaining his taxes, explaining himself as a businessman, he was just explaining the whole debate instead of actually talking about his economic policies. And I said this last week, Dagan, I just feel like his message is very cohesive and straightforward. Cut taxes, roll back regs. Her message is not. She's got to take him off message to be effective. That's all she's got.
And the thing that I know that Trump supporters have to find frustrating at this point is that he can't get out of his own way, that he can't help himself. And, Governor, to that point, if you talked to him in the last week, if you picked up the bat phone and said, hey, listen, Donald, here's the deal, have you done that?
I was in Israel all of last week, so I've got an excuse why I didn't have a chance to call him. But look, my advice to him is always this. Pivot away from the attacks and get back on your message. Pivot, pivot, pivot. Pivot so much that you tear your political ACL just moving and shifting, because that's what you've got to do in these last 30-plus days to focus on why Hillary Clinton is absolutely unprepared, unfit, and unqualified to be president, and why he can take this country in a totally different direction and fight the corruption. Look, the system is corrupt. The reason we have a complicated tax code, the reason that Republicans don't change it, the reason Democrats don't change it, is because manipulating the tax code is how they get political contributions. They're never going to change it unless somebody comes in and blows the thing up.
Yeah.
And Trump's the only one in this campaign who could do that.
Governor, I want to bring in former Texas Congressman and former presidential candidate himself, Ron Paul. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Your reaction to Senator Sanders' comments right there on third-party candidates?
You know, yeah, well, I think he's right. You know, if they don't vote for Clinton and vote for Trump, is going to help Trump. But, you know, I think, and she was right, and he agreed with her about, you know, the young people. The young people are certainly suffering, but I think he has it all wrong, that it has to be that they need more subsidies, I think, as a consequence of our economic policies, the consequence of the breakdown of the system, the consequence of the Federal Reserve policy. But it does have a lot of influence in the campaign, and I think if you vote against Hillary, you know, it's certainly going to help Trump.
We've got Gary Johnson and Dr. Stein. Now, Gary Johnson has failed so far to meet the minimum threshold of 15% support to be included in the debates. Does this show that the country is not fully ready to embrace a third-party candidate? I mean, look, they can't make it to the debate.
No, but they need to think about having a second party, because you know, you have any libertarian instincts or independent thinking, you realize that there's not a whole lot of difference. In spite of all the rhetoric, policies haven't changed in my lifetime. Government keeps getting bigger. They spend more money. Debt gets worse. We keep fighting wars. Our civil liberties are abused. So this is all talk. But we need a party, and I like it sort of when they talk something about what Jill Stein would say, you know, a different foreign policy, and then they talk about what on occasion Johnson says about freer markets and less regulation. That combination should come together and be an alternative. But there's no democracy in this country, because if you do come even close to concluding that the parties are similar, we can't get on the ballots and we can't get into the debate. So it's all, no, the third party, so-called third party people, are never going to get 15%. The Republicans and Democrats run the debates, so they're not going to allow the competition. And now here we have the Bush people supporting Clinton. So they're the neocons. Here, yeah. Whoever ever would thought that Hillary would get the neocon vote. I did. I thought that. I said she could run as a Republican, and they're doing it. They're proving the whole point that these parties don't mean a heck of a lot.
Here's Harlan Hill.
So what do you think of the level of discourse? You know, you have Hillary Clinton calling Donald Trump supporters deplorables, irredeemable, un-American. You have her calling Bernie Sanders supporters basement dwellers. You know what? This is really nasty. You know, and for some reason it doesn't really seem to stick to her the way it would to Donald Trump.
No, it's worse. They've always done this, but it's worse than ever. I think that this is the tool that they use to avoid talking about the real issues, you know, about Benghazi and Libya and Syria and all the interventions we have and what the Federal Reserve should be doing and what are they going to actually cut. No, they argue over who can raise the military spending the most. It goes back and forth. Anything to avoid it becomes personality, which is I find rather disgusting. You know, I think that, but it's done deliberately so that they are not really thinking about what kind of policies would actually change the country to the better.
But Congressman, kind of what has been kind of ugliness of this campaign, is this just the ugliness that has always been in politics? It's just been behind the scenes and the American people just didn't see it until now.
No, I think sometimes it wasn't so bad. It's always been there, but I don't think it was so bad. I first went to Congress in the 70s. I don't think it was that bad at all. I think it's a reflection of economics. I mean, people are poor today. The middle class is getting wiped out. And like even Sanders said, you know, people you know, borrow money to go to school. Well, why do they follow such policy? Because the government teaches them to do that. An economic system says borrowing is good, spending is good. There's nothing wrong with debt, but then there's a limit to it. You can get by borrowing and borrowing, and a country gets along, especially if they can issue the reserve currency, they get by a lot longer. But eventually it runs out of steam. We're running out of steam, and they can't patch it over by more borrowing and spending. Debt is the big problem. We've spent beyond our means. We have to now realize that we're going to be living beneath our means, no matter how much the government says they're going to spend to take care of the millennials and take care of big business and take care of all the poor people in the world and take care of the world and take care of every migrant that
Here's Anthony.
You know, there's just not enough wealth there, right?
Congressman, who are you telling your supporters to support in this election?
Whomever they want, and it probably won't matter much. No, I don't tell them. And but if they want to vote Libertarian, I said, because I'm disappointed with the performance of the Libertarian leaders. But I stick to the principle that the Libertarian believes in the non-aggression principle. The market works and freedom works if you accept one law, and that law is you can't do harm to other people. But government shouldn't be able to do harm to other people. But if you stick to that principle, voting, you know, Libertarian and sort of recognizing what you're doing. But I think if you have a sincere progressive, and I know them, I've worked with them, and they say, well, one of the most important issues for me is civil liberties and a change in our foreign policy, I think Jill Stein, vote for. But realize that
what tomorrow night's the big vice presidential debate. What do you think we should expect?
Oh, from my viewpoint, they might talk about issues better, but the media and probably the candidates will be found very boring because they want conflict. They want people to call people names and yell and scream at each other, and that's all entertainment. We're in the entertainment world. We're not into a political discussion. It's not a serious political, economic, philosophic discussion, and yet all political activity is a consequence of serious talk about what policies we have. What we have today is a consequence of 100 years of a philosophy of government that says the role of our federal government is not the purpose of protecting liberty, but it's to tell us how to run our lives and how we should speak. It tells us, you know, what we should do with foreign countries and how to run their lives, and and how they can run the economy. How come the Fed is failing and it's running the economy? That's what we've inherited 100 years ago, and we're seeing the end stages of this. It's not being recognized, but we're in a serious crisis because this current system will end just as the Soviet system came crashing down. I think our economic system will come crashing down, and we will have to make some really serious decisions which will not be made in this election.
Well, shame on us if we're not discussing the issues that are important to the American people, that's for sure. Congressman, thanks very much for your insights. We appreciate it.